I noticed it first in the way she started turning her phone face down on the kitchen counter. Small things. A woman who used to leave her phone lying around unlocked, laughing at memes over my shoulder, now flinched when a notification lit up the screen. She'd glance at it, then glance at me, then slide it into her pocket like she was hiding a secret she hadn't quite decided to keep yet. The words that kept surfacing were always the same. A business trip, a conference, an opportunity, and always, somewhere in the sentence, his name, her boss, or her new mentor, depending on which version of the story she was telling that week. She said it so casually, like she expected me to nod along the way I always had. For 9 years I had. But something about the way her voice softened when she said his name, the way she avoided my eyes right after, told me this wasn't just a work trip. I sat her down one evening after our daughter had gone to bed. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked her, plainly, to look at me and tell me the truth about what was happening between her and this man. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that this was exactly the kind of controlling behavior her friends had warned her about. I told her it wasn't about control. It was about respect, about the fact that a wife who has nothing to hide doesn't hide her phone. Then I said the words I never thought I'd have to say out loud in my own home. If she got on that plane with him, we were done. Not as a threat, as a fact. I told her that a marriage isn't broken by distance or by mistakes. It's broken by choices, and this would be hers. She laughed. She actually laughed, called me insecure, said I was overreacting to nothing, and 3 days later she was rolling a suitcase out the front door while I stood in the hallway watching her go. To understand how we got there, you'd have to go back 9 years, to a courthouse wedding with 12 guests and a dinner afterward at a restaurant that's since closed down. We didn't have much money then. What we had was each other, and a plan. She wanted to climb the ladder in her field, and I wanted to build a life steady enough to hold both of our ambitions. When our daughter was born, we made a decision together. I would slow down my own career, take the flexible job, be the one who did school pickups and pediatrician appointments, so she could chase the promotions she'd worked so hard for. I never resented it. I was proud of her. I used to tell people at parties, with real pride in my voice, that my wife was going to run that company one day. She got the promotion 2 years ago. Regional director. I threw her a small party, bought her a bottle of the wine she liked, told our daughter that mommy was a big deal now. For a while it seemed to change nothing except her hours. Then, slowly, it changed everything. The late nights got later. The calls she used to take in the living room started happening behind the closed bedroom door. She bought clothes she never used to wear. Sleeker, more expensive, nothing like the woman who used to steal my hoodies on Sunday mornings. There was a new perfume on her dresser I didn't recognize. A bottle she seemed embarrassed for me to see. I mentioned it to a few of our friends carefully, the way you test the temperature of water before stepping in. Most of them told me I was reading too much into it. She's just busy. You're being insecure. Every woman needs friends at work. I wanted to believe them. I wanted more than anything to be the paranoid husband imagining shadows on the wall. But paranoid husbands don't usually turn out to be right, and some quiet, exhausted part of me already knew I was. I confronted her twice before that final conversation. Both times, she gave me the same answer. He's just a friend, a colleague, someone who happens to understand the pressure of the job in a way I supposedly couldn't. I never asked her to stop working with him. I never asked her to quit her job or cut off every man she knew. All I asked was for honesty and for boundaries. For her to recognize that a marriage requires certain lines that don't get crossed, secrets that don't get kept, trips that don't get taken alone with someone who made her hide her phone. The night before she left, I tried one more time. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that this had stopped being about jealousy a long time ago. I told her I trusted her enough to build a decade of my life around her, and that what I couldn't trust anymore was the version of her that had started lying to me in small, deliberate ways. I told her that if she got on that plane, she wasn't just going on a trip, she was choosing him, or at least choosing the idea of him, over the family we had built. She stared at me for a long moment, and then she said the sentence I still hear sometimes late at night. You can't control who I spend my time with. I told her I never wanted to control her. I only ever wanted her to choose us. She picked up her suitcase the next morning anyway, kissed our daughter goodbye, and walked out the door toward a car that was already waiting outside. I didn't sleep that first night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying 9 years in my head, trying to figure out at what exact point the woman I married had started becoming a stranger. By morning, I had made a decision, and once I made it, I didn't look back. I called a divorce attorney I'd found weeks earlier during one of my quieter, more suspicious nights, back when I was still hoping I wouldn't need her services. I sat in that office and signed the first round of paperwork with a steadiness that surprised even me. Grief, it turns out, can look a lot like calm when you've had enough time to prepare for it. Over the next few days, while she posted vague, glowing photos from some resort with a caption about growth and new beginnings, I did the quiet, unglamorous work of ending a marriage. I separated our finances, moved the joint accounts into something I could control cleanly, made sure our daughter's savings were protected no matter what came next. I packed her belongings into boxes and suitcases, folding each item with a strange, hollow discipline, the way you might clean up after a party that ended badly. I wasn't doing it out of cruelty. I was doing it because I needed her to understand the moment she walked back through that door that this wasn't a bluff. I had told her exactly what would happen, and I was not the kind of man who says things he doesn't mean. While I packed, I found things I wish I hadn't. Messages left open on a shared cloud account we'd never bothered separating. Nothing explicit, nothing she could call proof of a physical affair, but enough. The inside jokes, the late-night check-ins, the way he called her things a colleague has no business calling a married woman. It confirmed everything I already suspected and somehow still managed to break something new in me. I didn't need it to convince myself I was right. I needed it to stop the small, aching part of me that kept whispering, maybe I was wrong, maybe I overreacted, maybe I should call her and tell her to come home and we'll pretend none of this happened. I also learned something I hadn't expected. A mutual acquaintance, someone who worked adjacent to her company, mentioned almost in passing that this mentor of hers had a reputation. He had done this before. The late-night texts, the promises of understanding a woman better than her husband did, the slow, deliberate work of making a married employee feel chosen and special until the moment she actually left her marriage for him. Then, without fail, he disappeared. 2 other women at 2 other companies had learned the same lesson before her, apparently the hard way. She learned it too on that trip, though not from anyone kind enough to warn her. According to what our daughter told me weeks later, repeating things she'd overheard, the business trip had barely started before the cracks in his charm began to show. He grew distant the moment they were somewhere private, spent more time on his own phone than with her, made offhand comments that made it clear he had never intended anything resembling a real relationship. Whatever fantasy she'd built in her head about starting over with him evaporated somewhere between the airport and the hotel checkout. By the time her flight landed back home, she wasn't returning as a woman glowing with new beginnings. She was returning to apologize. She let herself in with her key, expecting, I think, the usual scene. A tense conversation, some hurt feelings, maybe a cold shoulder that would thaw in a week or 2 the way it always had after our smaller arguments. Instead, she found closets standing open and empty. She found drawers cleared out, her side of the bathroom counter bare. She found the space on the hallway wall where our wedding photo used to hang, now just a faint outline in the paint where the frame had protected it from the light for 9 years. On the kitchen table, where I used to leave her coffee ready in the mornings, there was a single folded piece of paper instead. It held 2 things. The divorce papers, and a short note. I didn't write her paragraphs. I didn't write her an accusation or a eulogy for our marriage. I wrote 5 words, because 5 words were all that were left to say. I meant every word. She called that afternoon, and the next morning, and the one after that. I let most of them go to voicemail, not out of spite, but because I genuinely had nothing left to say that the note hadn't already covered. She showed up at my workplace once, standing in the lobby until security asked her to wait outside. And I watched from an upstairs window as she paced the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear, presumably calling me again from 20 feet away. She cried to our mutual friends, the same ones who had once told me I was overreacting. And I heard later that more than one of them finally admitted the truth. I had warned everyone, calmly and clearly, weeks before any of this happened. Nobody could say they hadn't heard it coming. Even her own parents, people who had always been kind to me, told her plainly that she had done this to herself. Her mother reportedly said that a man doesn't draw a line like that in front of witnesses unless he means it, and that ignoring a boundary because you don't believe the consequences are real doesn't make the consequences any less real when they arrive. The divorce moved forward over the following months. I stayed respectful throughout because bitterness never once felt like the version of myself I wanted our daughter to see. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't drag things out to punish her. I simply followed through on exactly what I had said I would do. Nothing more and nothing less. When it came to our daughter, the court asked her preference, gently the way they do with children old enough to have one. She chose to spend the majority of her time with me, not out of anger toward her mother, but because, as she put it in her own quiet way, Home with me had never stopped feeling like home. Stability, it turns out, speaks louder to a child than any apology ever could. As for the man who had started all of it, he didn't stick around long enough to face any of the fallout he'd caused. Within a couple of months, he transferred to another branch in another city, the same pattern, I was told, that had followed him through his last 2 entanglements. My ex-wife wasn't only left without the relationship she'd gambled everything on, she eventually lost her footing at work too, as the fallout from an office relationship gone sideways made its way, as these things always do, into performance reviews and closed-door meetings. The friends who had once filled our group chats slowly stopped reaching out to her, the way people quietly do when they no longer know which version of someone to believe. I didn't spend those months plotting anyone's downfall. I didn't need to. I spent them rebuilding, which turned out to be a far better use of the time. I focused on our daughter. School projects, weekend hikes, the small, ordinary routines that had gotten buried under years of putting someone else's career first. I picked guitar back up, an old hobby I'd abandoned somewhere around year 3 of our marriage without ever really noticing it was gone. I put real energy back into my own work for the first time in years, and within a year I'd earned the kind of promotion I had quietly set aside so long ago to support someone else's climb. Somewhere in that rebuilding, without particularly looking for it, I met someone new. She was steady in a way that felt unfamiliar at first, almost suspicious, until I realized that what I was reacting to wasn't a red flag. It was simply the presence of honesty, something I hadn't fully felt in years. She never once made me feel like I needed to hide my phone from her. She asked about my daughter before she asked about anything else. Almost a year after that empty house, I ran into my ex-wife by accident across a parking lot outside a grocery store. I had my daughter's hand in mine, and the woman I was now building something with was walking beside me, laughing at something my daughter had said. I watched my ex-wife stop mid-step when she saw us. She didn't come over, she didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment, watching a life that used to be hers move easily past her, whole and unbothered, before she turned and walked the other way. The trip she had insisted on taking lasted exactly 7 days. What it cost her lasted far longer than that. A marriage, a career she'd built for over a decade, a husband who had once organized his entire life around her ambitions, a daughter who, given the choice, chose stability over apology. All of it traded for a week she now can't even remember fondly because the man at the center of it never intended to give her anything real to remember. Trust isn't built in a single conversation, and it isn't broken in one either, usually. It's built slowly, over years of small choices that say, I choose you, again and again, until it becomes the quiet foundation you stop noticing is even there. But a boundary, clearly spoken, plainly understood, and deliberately ignored, can undo all of it in a single decision. She had every chance to turn around. I gave her the words, the warning, and the choice. She chose the plane instead. And some doors, once you walk through them, simply don't open the same way again.